The amazing worlds of Norse mythology. The amazing Norse myths have influenced modern culture in surprising ways. They tell of human experiences we still have today. Norse myths emphasize nature and our impact on it. The animals, gods, and humans who live in the worlds of Yggdrasil both nourish and damage the tree with their actions. The World Tree myth warns us to care for our living world. The Eddas also tell of Ragnarok, when the old gods and old worlds will die. However, the myths don't indicate what will happen afterward. Some scholars say the world will end forever, but others believe history will repeat. This uncertain cycle of endings and beginnings reflects our feelings about the past and future. Another way Norse myths are still relevant is in superheroes. If Odin, Asgard, and Loki sound familiar, it's likely because you've seen them in Marvel's Thor. Thor is the Norse god of thunder, and Marvel turned him into a superhero for its films and comics. Thor stands for protecting the weak and keeping promises. Needless to say, this shows how many of our values have stayed constant over time. Norse mythology has more to teach, so take the chance to learn about the Norse vision of the world.
Hey everyone, welcome to English for You. I'm Mike.
And I'm Laura.
And we are back with day 3 of our look at Norse myths. So far, we've read some of the myths, we've heard some of the origin stories, how the Norse gods were created. When you compare it to other ones, like especially Greek and Roman, which are the ones we've talked about before, what do you think of the Norse myths, Laura?
They're crazy.
They're kind of crazy, right?
They're kind of like you're going to lose an eye.
Yeah.
You're going to like somebody's going to bite off your arm or hand.
Right. But they're very Viking.
Yeah.
They kind of make me think of people with helmets with horns on them and axes, going out in boats and killing people all over the part of Europe and stuff. It kind of fits very well.
Yes.
I've always kind of thought, I'm not sure I would be a good Viking. I might be like, guys, it's cold. Why do we have to do that? Why do I have to chop people's hands off? Why can't we do something nice? Exactly. Can we go to Greece where it's warm?
Exactly.
But they're very interesting. So, often these kinds of myths we know, and they've been changed, they've been adapted, they've been turned into Marvel movies in some way, So it's kind of cool to kind of get back to the origin, to the real stories, and see how even crazier they are than many of the movies and the versions we think of today. So let's get into a few more, and we'll also see how some of these myths, do translate over into modern entertainment. But let's begin the article by reading the first sentence, which says, "The amazing Norse myths have influenced modern culture in surprising ways." Absolutely. We've mentioned Marvel movies. I think in day 1, I mentioned heavy metal music. And there's actually a lot of heavy metal bands come from Sweden and Norway. And they have, stories about Odin and Thor and thunderbolts and great warriors and stuff like that. So, it's still really interesting to people. And also many movies, even Game of Thrones and things like that, Lord of the Rings, they have some influence. So there is definitely a strong influence of these myths in a lot of entertainment and culture these days. We had that word amazing. If something's amazing, it's incredible, it's wonderful, it's awesome, it's super, it's really, really good. It kind of blows your mind, man. It's definitely something not normal or boring or everyday. For example, the Beatles wrote and recorded some amazing music. That's why they are still popular today. Absolutely. You can still listen to that stuff and go, wow, this was recorded like 50 or 60 years ago? Crazy.
Okay, amazing. 其实在口语很常用哦，就是太棒了，极好的，还有令人吃惊这样的意思，令人讶异的。它是个形容词哦。For example, the magic show was absolutely amazing. 所以课文提到的是哇，神奇的北欧神话，以哇令人可能非常吃惊或是很棒的一个方式呢，影响了现代文化哦。我们接着就来看看哪些。
All right, they tell of human experiences we still have today. Yeah, absolutely. Myths, old stories from religion as well. Thousands of years might have passed, but people are still people. We still do things that are silly or wonderful. We fall in love. We do evil stuff. We face challenges in our lives. So they talk about human experiences we still have today. Maybe we don't cut our hands off, but, we have to sacrifice. Or lose an eye. But we do have to sacrifice, in other words, to get things we want. Norse myths emphasize nature and our impact on it. Very interesting. That's something that Greek myths maybe don't do so much. But I know a lot of Japanese myths also talk about the effect of nature and, the relationship between humans and nature and how we can impact nature as well. I mean, of course, when we think of global warming and pollution, that is the impact that modern humans have on nature. An impact is a powerful effect that something has on another thing, all right? So if you smoke and drink and eat junk food, that will have a big impact on your health. But if you eat well and exercise and live a healthy life, that impact will become a positive impact. So it can be good, it can be bad, but we're talking about a big effect. And we'd mentioned that in our example sentence. Eating too much junk food can have a huge impact on your physical and emotional health. That's a good point. Also, you feel depressed, you feel sad, you have no energy. It's not just your body and, gaining weight. You can also suffer from mental and emotional problems if you have a bad diet.
OK，impact 这个是当作名词来用了，在本课的用法，它是影响或者是冲击的意思。我们常会说 impact on something， 就是对什么东西的影响或是冲击。For example, the new school policy had a significant impact on students' schedules. OK， 回到课文，我们就讲到了这个北欧神话。OK， 它其实讲述了我们今天仍然会经历的人类的经验。那北欧神话强调的是大自然以及我们对其的影响，就是我们对大自然的影响。
The animals, gods, and humans who live in the worlds of Yggdrasil both nourish and damage the tree with their actions. Absolutely. In the same way that we can damage nature with our actions, the world tree myth warns us to care for our living world. So think of the world tree as Mother Earth.
OK, nourish 这个动词就是滋养。所以回到课文是说，生活在世界之树，也就是 Yggdrasil 的动物啊，然后神啊和人类啊，它透过他们的行为，同时滋养和损害这棵树。那世界树的神话告诫我们要照顾我们的生命世界，爱护我们的居住环境是多么的重要啊。
Okay, and the Eddas, remember those are the two books that we get a lot of these myths from. The Eddas also tell of Ragnarok, when the old gods and old worlds will die. Ragnarok, I think, is kind of like the end of the world, when the world becomes crazy and chaos and nothing's in control and a lot of bad things happen. However, the myths don't indicate what will happen afterward. Very interesting. So maybe the world ends at that point, or maybe the world is born again in a new and better form. The Eddas doesn't really say, because it doesn't talk about what happens afterward, later on. So if we're talking about an event, and that's what we're focusing on, and then you want to know, okay, when the event ends, then what happens? Then you would be saying what happens afterward. We can also sometimes say afterwards. Sometimes people will put an S on that. But it basically means later on or further on in time. For example, on their first date last Saturday, Rebecca and David went to see a play and then had dinner afterward. So they had dinner after watching the play.
Okay, afterward or afterwards. Okay, 这个副词有之后、后来如何如何。For example, we aced the exam and afterward we celebrated with pizza. 课文提到的是那个埃达或者是 The Eddas 也讲述了这个 Ragnarok， 在那个时候呢，旧神和旧世界将会毁灭。然而呢，这个神话并未指明之后会发生什么事情。
All right. Well, some scholars say the world will end forever, but others believe history will repeat. Oh, so we'll go back to the beginning and do it all over again in a slightly different way. Who says this? Scholars. Scholars are basically experts in something. People who've studied it, who've read a lot about it. If you're a scholar of Norse myth, You probably teach the subject in a university or write books about it or something like that. You're not just a guy who watched an interesting YouTube video once and you tell everyone what you know. No, you've probably spent much of your life studying this and getting a lot of education about it. For example, archaeologists are also scholars of history. They're not just digging old stuff out of the ground. They know about that stuff. They're experts, in other words.
Right, scholar 是什么呢？就是学者的意思，它是一个名词。For example, Professor Lee is a renowned scholar in the field of physics. 那课文提到的就是有些学者认为世界将永远结束，但也有人相信历史将会重演。
This uncertain cycle of endings and beginnings reflects our feelings about the past and future. Yeah, the Eddas doesn't know the future, just like we don't know the future either. We can make guesses. We can kind of hope that things will, work out well and we'll have another chance to fix our mistakes, but we don't really know.
OK. 所以这种不确定的结局和开始的循环 OK, 循环就是 cycle, 它是个名词，反映了我们对过去和未来的感受，其中的 reflect 就是有反映显示的意思，它是一个动词哦。
So we can completely relate to how the Eddas can't tell the future and can't tell us what will happen. That is something we understand living in our world today, many years later. Another way Norse myths are still relevant is in superheroes. So yeah, we're talking about the ways these old myths from, 1,500 years ago are still relevant. If something is relevant, it relates to you, all right? It has some kind of way of touching you in a way that is real. It's not like reading about things from the past and going, well, I'd never lived that way and I've never had that kind of life or that experience. But if you talk about things that people are worried about, having a job, falling in love, making a family, being healthy, living a good life, that stuff is still relevant. If we're talking about the ancient Romans or, people from 500 years ago or people from 100 years ago, it relates to you. It makes sense to you. It has some kind of way of touching you in a very real way. Here's an example. Frankie's boss wastes a lot of time during company meetings by talking about things that aren't really relevant in any way. We're having a company meeting and he's talking about the great golf course that he went to last Saturday. Like, okay, we don't play golf. That's not relevant to the company's business.
Relevant 这个形容词就是与主题相关的啦，有关的For example, make sure your comments in class are relevant to the discussion. OK, 所以另外一个方式呢，这个北欧神话呢，在现在的生活当中还是有点关联呢，就是在超级英雄当中啦。Are we going to talk about Thor now?
Yes, absolutely. Don't worry, Chris Hemsworth is almost here. If Odin, Asgard, and Loki sound familiar, it's likely because you've seen them in Marvel's Thor. There you go. Odin, was, I think, a character in there. Loki, of course, Tom Hiddleston. And Thor, Chris Hemsworth, in a different form. But, they are gods from the Norse myths. And that you know them, of course, from Marvel movies.
真的，如果 Odin Asgard 还有 Loki 你都觉得听起来很熟悉，那可能是因为你们在漫威的雷神索尔见过他们咯。Marvel 当然就是美国公司的漫威。
Thor is the Norse god of thunder. I think he's also a son of Odin. So the Norse god of thunder, and he's got that big hammer in the movies. And Marvel turned him into a superhero for its films and comics. Thor stands for protecting the weak and keeping promises, like any good superhero.
OK, 所以索尔呢就是雷神啦，而漫威将它变成了电影和漫画中的超级英雄。那索尔代表着什么呢？保护弱者和守承诺。
But of course, we should warn you, if you go to the library and get out a book of Norse mythology, do not expect to find an Iron Man in there.
No.
There is no Spider-Man in Norse mythology. These people are all added by Marvel. But we're taking inspiration, basically, from the Norse myths to create our modern superheroes. Needless to say, this shows how many of our values have stayed constant over time. That's right. We're talking about things that are still relevant in our superhero stories, just as relevant as from Norse myths from thousands of years ago. They stay constant over time. They're always there. They don't change. Things like protecting the weak, being honest, telling the truth, doing something, sacrificing for other people. These are still true for people today, just like they were a long, long time ago.
OK， 在这一句当中，我们看到今天要教大家的 language and focus. So let's take a look. 今天 language and focus 要看的是独立不定词片语哦，它是副词性质，那功用呢就是修饰整个句子，可以放在句首啦、句中或是句尾哦。若放在句首的时候，后面会加上逗号。使其与句中的其他部分隔开。以下是几种常见的用法。第一个用法就是形容词接上 to say， 像是 needless to say， 就是当然不用说 blah blah blah， 或是 sad to say， 令人难过的是如何如何。举例来说 needless to say, the surprise party was a huge success, and the birthday girl was genuinely touched. 再来我们可以用 to 像是 to be honest 就是老实说如何如何，或是 to be fair 说句公道话，或是 to put it another way 换句话说。同样举个例子会比较清楚哦。 You're still in school, or put it another way, you don't have the experience we need.你仍然在学，换句话说，你并没有我们需要的经验。
All right, yeah, we talked about that word constant. They've stayed constant over time. If something is constant, it doesn't change. It's always there. It's always going on. It doesn't take a break. It doesn't break down or stop. It's always going on. For example, we need to keep these machines at a constant temperature of 20 degrees Celsius. The machines always must run, must not get too hot, must not get too cold. That constant temperature is very important.
Constant 这个形容词就是不变的啦，始终如一的。For example, the constant buzzing of notifications on my phone is driving me crazy.
Oh, that is annoying.
I know. Now, we also saw the phrase overtime, 就是随着时间过去。For example, your language skills will improve over time if you practice consistently. 所以回到课文是说，无需多说啊，这显示了我们许多价值观在很长的时间内都是不变的哦。
Norse mythology has more to teach, so take the chance to learn about the Norse vision of the world. Yeah, when we often think of these European myths, Greek myths, Roman myths are the ones most people think about. As we have seen over the last 3 days, Norse mythology has a lot of cool stories as well, and a lot of good wisdom to teach us. So yeah, why not check them out?
OK, 所以最后课文是写到北欧神话还有更多的教导，所以呢，要趁机了解一下北欧对世界的看法吧。And now it's time for our For You chat.
Absolutely. And we're going to look at superheroes, not just the ones like Thor and Loki that come from Norse mythology, but anyone. Which superhero is your favorite, Laura? And what do they represent to you?
Oh,
I'm going to guess that your favorite superhero is Thor with his shirt off.
No.
No?
No.
Oh, okay.
Okay, there's so many I like, but if I have to choose a favorite one, my favorite superhero is Wonder Woman. She represents strength and bravery to me. Wonder Woman makes me feel empowered and reminds me to stay strong even when facing tough decisions.
There's a very good reason why.
Tough situations, sorry.
And tough decisions, too. She has to make some of those in those movies as well. There you go. Thanks for joining us, guys. We'll see you in Asgard at some point in the future, maybe, hopefully. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Vocabulary Review.
Amazing. Kathleen has the amazing ability to learn a new dance in just a few minutes. Impact. My grandfather taught many children to read, and his work had an impact on his small village. Afterward. Sue finished her homework, and afterward, she went outside to play with her friends. Scholar. Many people think that the Dark Ages was a bad period for Europe, but some scholars don't agree. Relevant. During a discussion about climate change, understanding the connection between human activities and the environment is highly relevant. Constant. Nothing in the universe stays constant. Everything in this world keeps changing.
智慧小补帖
Nourish. Reflect.